we talk about the people that are the best at what they do. We talk about the people that are the best at what they do and are able to sustain performance over long periods of time. They're able to have this harmony, this coexistence of being on and being off, of engaging as well as detaching.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode on the Growth Project podcast brought to you by AMPLOS. I'm here today with my colleague Anthony Alibro, and we will be talking today about the importance of silence and solitude. Some people find this really challenging to just sit in silence and solitude, and others, you may be listening to this and be thinking, gosh, I love sitting in my silence and solitude. So we'll talk today kind of about the importance of it and the challenges associated with it. Anthony, for you, when you hear silence and solitude, what are your initial reactions?
Discomfort, to be completely honest with you. No, it was funny before we started this podcast, we were talking about like, okay, like silence and solitude comes easier to some people than others, right? And for example, myself, like this is something that I struggle with. It's like, how do you just simply exist, right? What mindfulness practices are you engaging in where you are truly detaching from your day to day and you're truly just existing and being at a specific point in time? And when I think about this, I'm like, how often am I just being? It's usually not that often. Usually I'm pretty go, go, go. I'm pretty focused on accomplishing some kind of task and accomplishing some kind of goal. So I know for me, and I'm sure people in the audience can also relate, this idea that we view performance and silence and solitude and breaks as two separate entities, but really they're intertwined with one another. There's a certain amount of harmony that goes into that go, 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 that perform, that do, as well as that be, as well as that appreciate the silence and solitude.
Yeah, and we go back to the science of recovery, right? And we know that recovery is so crucial for performance. And there's really two umbrellas of recovery, right? There's the physical rest and recovery, which we all know well. It's getting 8 hours of sleep, allowing your body that physical break. But then we've talked about this a lot in the past, the mental side of recovery, right? And that's allowing yourself the time to detach, allowing yourself the time to relax and have some autonomy over your life and break that cycle of just being go, 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 task oriented. But to your point, like I think this can be very challenging for some people getting into a comfortability with sitting in silence, getting comfortable doing nothing at all. And that's easier said than done.
No, it is. And to that end, like there is such a vital importance of it. Of course, for the rejuvenation aspect,
Mhm.
right? If you're go, go, go all the time, as you mentioned, the physical side as well as the mental side, like you'll probably find yourself in more of those brain fogs. You'll probably find yourself getting lost in the just going through the motions. That idea of taking those intentional pauses, really sitting in the silence, sitting in the solitude as well to get some clarity, to take a step back and see the bigger picture and take on a new perspective on what you're doing and really why you're doing it too.
Yeah, the benefits to it are endless, and that it really does allow you to come back, like you said, with that clarity, that ability to see things from a new lens, to alleviate maybe frustration when I can think of times where I've been dialed into a project or a task and I become almost tunnel vision on trying to solve the problem, but can't figure it out. And it becomes frustrating. I step away for 5 minutes, bathroom break, water break, whatever, come back. And I'm like, okay, I feel better, right? Like I can now see a solution to the problem here. Having that clarity and just from a simple like 5 minute, let me step away from the screen, that ability to break the engagement and allow yourself to reset is a skill in and of itself. What's the difference, Anthony, between like detachment and disengagement?
I would say the detachment's a lot more intentional, right? So when you're thinking about detachment, when you're thinking about, okay, like for your example was perfect, right? You're lost in a task, right? You're going through the motions, you're so tunnel visioned on it Disengagement is you're probably looking at it and there's just nothing behind the eyes there, right? You're
Mhm.
looking at it and your thoughts kind of mindlessly go to a ton of different places. Versus the detachment is a lot more intentional, where you are stepping away. I'm looking at the downtown Greenville behind you. It looks like it's a pretty nice day. It's pretty rainy here in Nashville. So you're probably going for a bit of a walk and you're appreciating some fresh air. Maybe you're grabbing a cup of coffee. Maybe you're grabbing a snack, something to revitalize, rejuvenate a bit. That's the detachment aspect that we're talking about. That's the aspect of there's a tensionality behind, okay, let me step away from this so I can view it with fresh eyes. That way, instead of honing in on one singular piece of the puzzle, I can see the puzzle for all that it actually is. So that the level of intentionality that you're approaching it with would be the main distinguisher between disengagement versus detachment.
The intention really is what separates the two, and that understanding that I am detaching with purpose, whereas disengaging is I just don't care. I'm apathetic towards this task, towards, showing up for my job. Whereas detaching is I'm doing this so that I can perform better. And we're really good at prioritizing, again, our to-do list. We're really good at prioritizing, well, most of the time, we're good at prioritizing our physical rest, right? I don't know anybody who's pulling all-nighters 5 days a week. They know to prioritize getting sleep, but prioritizing and being intentional with detaching is it's less common, especially with high performers, right?
Yeah, and it's hard to turn it off, right? It's very, very difficult to turn it off, especially when you have that ambition, when you have those lofty standards that you set either for yourself or that the environment or organization is setting for you. So like that idea of it's hard to sometimes play with that voice in your head to be like, hey, if I turn off right now, if I step away from this, is somebody else outpacing me? Is another competitor outpacing me? Am I going to allow myself? Am I doing enough if I allow this turn off? And it's a bit of a battle internally of like, okay, what's the benefit of this versus what's the drawback of this?
Mm. I remember when I was doing my dissertation on the, premise of mental rest, and detaching was a big component of that. And I remember this graphic that my advisor showed me of a brain with a light switch on it. And it really is like just switching that light switch off, that ability to just shut down for a few minutes and then turn the light back on. And I go back to, like, in our household, especially, we're big on when you leave a room, you turn the light switch off, right? When you enter the room, you can turn it back on. But even if I leave the room for 2 minutes and I know I'm coming right back in there, I still turn that light switch off, come back and turn it back on. And that's kind of the analogy we're going for, is when you are able to walk away from something, hit that light switch in your mind and shut off from it, and then come back and flip it back on, right? That light switch isn't going anywhere.
That's a great visual for it too, right? Because if we think about it, if the lights are always on, then one, that electricity bill is going to suck. But two, right? If the lights are always on, this is where you have this energy drain, right? This is
Mm,
where we see it, especially on the other side of the analogy when we talk about the person always leaving the lights on. This is where you see the burnout, right? This
right.
is where you see this exhaustion over time. And again, we always talk about burnout. It gets beyond physical exhaustion. It's a lot of like the mental and emotional exhaustion too, where you have this sort of a numbness. You have this fog where you just can't think straight anymore.
Yeah.
There's a stress component. And then at the end of the day, once you're so caught up and the lights are always on, there's a question that lingers in your head of why am I doing this? Like
Mm.
what's the point of this anymore? And that's where you see the disengagement, and that's where you also see that reduced motivation over time of who cares about this anymore? Like why am I going to these ends to meet these demands?
And you just hit the nail on the head. Like, the predictors of burnout are exhaustion, right? That emotional, physical exhaustion, that reduced sense of accomplishment, feeling like you're just not able to get things done, and devaluation, right? Like, I'm so stressed and overwhelmed that I don't even value the work that I'm doing anymore. But yeah, going back to that analogy, you leave the light on all day long, that light bulb's going to burn out very quickly.
Yeah,
It will not last as long. Same thing for the longevity of our careers. The If you're, an athlete, the sports that you play, we see it all the time. Like, you've got to be able to create that silence and solitude.
absolutely. And there's an important distinction too with this idea that if you're doing nothing physically, you're recovering, right? Like if you're doing nothing physically, if you're sitting there vegging out, my wife and I are binging Sons of Anarchy right now, so that's the clearest example of a show that we're doing where, okay, I'm doing nothing physically, but to that end, mentally you can still be on, right?
Mhm.
Mentally you can still be thinking about your day to day. You're constantly replaying the day to day, whatever presentations you had that day, whatever podcast
Mhm.
that you recorded. Maybe you had an individual client, maybe you had a client call, whatever it may be, right? So for example, that again, I'm just going to keep beating the dead horse of this analogy here, right? If the lights are always on, even if you're outside of the room, it still lingers, right? That
Mhm.
bulb is still prone to that burning out because even though you're physically doing nothing, your mind is still going. You're
Mhm.
beginning to replay those things. You're ruminating, if you will, on a lot of those things. So the the constant meaning making, the constant looping of just returning over and over and over again means, yeah, maybe you worked a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 4, but your mind probably worked a 7 to 10 or a seven
Yeah.
to 11.
And I think that's something every, I would say high performer, but even just almost every human being resonates with, right? Like not being able to create that separation from the demands of your job and the demands of your personal life as well. And so that they kind of bleed over into each other and you never get that true detachment. I can think of this weekend, my fiance and I were driving back. We took a road trip and we loaded up the car, loaded up the three dogs. Like it was a lot of stimulus, a lot going on, making sure we had everything. We get in the car, we get on the road, and my fiance goes, "Do you want to turn on some music or, a podcast?" And I was like, "No." I said, "No, I just want to sit in silence for like 5 to 10 minutes, and then we can, jam out or turn on a podcast, whatever." But you really do feel it, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, where after a lot of input, you're like, "I just need nothing."
Yeah, especially in the tech age, right? There's so many inputs. Whether it's a
Mhm.
podcast, whether it's an album, whether it's Outlook, Teams, Slack, whatever platform you're using or operating on. The idea of there's always something going on. There's always a little red badge, if you will, whether it's on your desktop, whether it's on your phone, whether it's in your mind too. That constant that constant engagement. And I want to ask you, as the mental rest and recovery expert within AMPLOS here, and as someone who candidly struggles with silence and solitude and would be the first person on that road trip to go, let's listen to a podcast or let's listen to an album here. Why do you think this is so important? Why does the silence and solitude matter?
I think the clearest answer I can give on this is similar to what we're saying in regards to inputs and stimulus. Like if our brains are constantly processing information, we only have a certain capacity, right? Every single day, a certain level of energy. And so it drains us. So the more inputs you're giving your brain, the quicker your energy is going to be drained. So you have to be, especially in this day and age, very selective with your inputs. When they are like, oh, when you're turning on podcast, when you're opening your email, when you're engaging with your colleagues. It's so important because there are such limited opportunities for it. And it's so easy to get overwhelmed with the inputs. So the silence piece is being intentional with removing that external stimulation, allowing yourself to have no inputs or very limited inputs for a set period of time to give your brain that moment to not process as much information, right? And then the solitude piece, and I think this is maybe what people struggle with a little bit more, is being alone with themselves and just alone with your own thoughts, and that scares a lot of people, but it is needed. You need that solitude to remove the pressure you feel and the expectations you feel due to the roles that you play, whether that be as a manager, whether that be as a parent, as a spouse. Like every person you interact with, there is some role you play. So allowing yourself to just sit in solitude alleviates you of that for a few minutes.
Yeah. Literally, as you were talking about the solitude piece, I felt like the discomfort, like the icky feeling, because it's almost to the point where when we don't have stimulation, we don't have something occupying our mind, whether it's a phone in my hand or whether it's a computer in front of me, whether it's watching a TV, watching the World Cup on right now, right? To sit with the idea of sitting alone with your thoughts. Like I sit there and I'm like, what can I be doing, right? What should I be doing right now to occupy myself? Clearly, I'm not being productive. Clearly, I'm not doing something that I should be doing. And it's again, like it's such a contrast in your head to be okay with it, to sit alone, not only with the silence, but with the aloneness and just truly reflecting on whatever is going on in your mind that's coming naturally, the being.
I'm hearing a lot of that solitude and that silence elicits feelings of like guilt or shame, right? It's like, oh, I should be doing this. And because I'm not, I feel bad. Even that disrupts the process of being able to detach and actually use that time in solitude to benefit you. Now it becomes, you know, more of a drain. It is hard, but then you've also got the flip of this. And I think we're, good examples of each side because you're one who, when you hear that solitude, sitting alone with yourself, it brings up that discomfort. I'm someone when I hear that, I'm like, oh, thank God. Like, oh my gosh, finally. I've always been a little bit more of an introvert. I've always been someone who likes the quiet time. And then my research being fully in the realm of detachment, I think it's something I've gotten really good at, which is also a danger because I can easily sit there and think about nothing at all, and then time gets away from me, and I'm like, oh man, it's been 30 minutes. I need to lock back in. But to this end, it's interesting to see the individual differences and to know that it is a skill that can be developed over time.
It is such a skill, and I'll be candid, it's something I've been trying to be better at. But no, it's absolutely like it's as much of a personal skill as much of like how can you affect systems in place
Yeah.
to help you with that silence and solitude, right?
Mhm.
And like a great example of that, going back to the technology example, is okay, what does it truly mean to shut down? What does it truly mean to turn off? I had a client engagement last week and we were talking about burnout. And when we talked about detachment, it's you can have everything in the right place, right? Like where you shut the lights off, you leave work, whether you work for remotely or whether you work in an office environment. But at the end of the day, if you get that Outlook notification, if you get that Teams notification, if you get something that cues your mind back into work mode, you'll reset it, right? You'll
Mhm.
immediately go back into it. So being very intentional with the systems that you have in place. Okay, this is my silence and solitude time. How am I protecting it? I know there's like screen blocking apps. I know on iPhone there's like focus settings as well. And I'm sure it exists for Android too, but making sure those schedules are in place and actually enforced to hold the accountability aspect is something crucial and something thankfully I've encountered over the last couple months because like you said, right? Like that silence and solitude time, it's easy to for you 30 minutes go by, you're like, wow, it's been 30 minutes. For me, 2 minutes go by and it's like, where am I? What's happening here? So that intentionality is absolutely crucial, especially with the technology age that we live in.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And it's interesting seeing the advancements within technology to actually help with this, right? Like being able to silence those notifications. I know even in Outlook now, on our calendars, we can go in and block out like focus time. It is something that is becoming more and more of a priority, I think, and people are starting to realize the importance because of, the detriments it can have on your sleep, your motivation, your the overall performance in relationships as well. There are so many tools in place to help people with this, but it's utilizing those and having, like you said, a system and process for it. So we've talked about it being a skill, right? Like this ability to detach or engage in silence and solitude, like it is a skill. What can you tell our listeners about a process or a system for getting better at this?
I mean, I think it just starts with awareness, right? It
Mm.
starts with awareness about what does the skill of pausing actually look like? And you can seek out athletic domains, you can seek out corporate domains, you can seek out military domains, all parenting domains. Really, it's not exclusive to your line of work. It's all encompassing of who we are in today's day and age. And we talk about the people that are the best at what they do. We talk about the people that are the best at what they do and are able to sustain performance over long periods of time. They're able to have this harmony, this coexistence of being on and being off, of engaging as well as detaching. So we can use this almost pause, reset, return cycle as a means of how do we detach in real time, right? So the perfect example that you had at the beginning of this podcast of you're in the middle of something and it's looking like hieroglyphs in front of you at this point, right? You're looking at it and it's like, I don't even know what I'm looking at on this screen anymore, whatever task that I'm doing. That's your cue to pause, right? Like that automatic engagement, really probably disengagement at this point where you're just looking at it to look at it, being very intentional. Okay, like I'm going to take a pause here. And what does that pause actually look like, right? Is it going on your phone and looking at reels is probably not the most effective pause, or is it appreciating the Greenville weather and taking a walk outside and getting some of that fresh air? Because that's where you get some of that reset component, right? That's where you get some of the reduction in mental input. Maybe you take your phone, you put it over to the side. Okay, like I'm not going to have my phone on me during this walk. I'm not going to have the idea or the capacity to respond to notifications during this walk because I really want to get my mind fresh. I want to get my eyes fresh. I want to be able to approach this with a fresh perspective. Now, if you do all of that correctly, that's where you get that return aspect, right? Where you're able to truly compartmentalize all of the notifications, all of the distractions, all of the stimuli, as you said, and then re-enter with clarity. Not just reactivity, not just mindless engagement, but true clarity about, okay, now I can reapproach this because I've given myself the capacity and the energy to do this.
There's a very clear beginning and end to this pause, reset, return cycle. There's a starting point where it is initiated by some cue, whether that's feelings of I'm looking at hieroglyphs or just I'm starting to feel a little tired. My eyes are burning a little bit. Let me pause. That's your start. But then you've got to have that set stop as well, right? Like a set return time. I'm taking 5 minutes or I'm taking 10 minutes, whatever that is. The danger is that it leads to procrastination, right? And that some people have the tendency to, when they take that break, be like, okay, well, now the weather's beautiful. I'm really enjoying this. I'm going to extend my 10-minute walk to a 20-minute walk. Or, I'm going to grab a coffee while I'm on this walk. And you kind of get lost in the sauce, if you will, right? If you don't have that hard stop. That is a big part of this skill, is having a beginning and an end, the accountability piece for returning and re-engaging.
I couldn't agree more with you, right? Like it's a fine line that you'll dance on, that you'll walk as you engage in these pauses, as you are using the skill of pausing. And again, there is a skill on both sides of it. You have to take advantage of the skill and actually pause, but you can't let the pause turn into a complete disengagement or a complete just procrastination opportunity, as you said. Like you have to have those hard stops. We have to have those systems in place. So when we talk about these systems, I guess for the audience, Gabby, like how do we make this practical? How do we make this go, hey, how can you plug these into your day to day?
It's a great question. And that's always where we want to kind of guide our listeners into is, okay, well, here's the science behind it. Here's what we know, but here's what you do with it, right? And we can kind of ping pong back and forth on these. But I would say the first is starting small, right? Start with your transition periods throughout your day. When you have, maybe you have a meeting at 10 a.m. from 10 to 10:30, and then you have an 11 a.m. You have a 30-minute gap right there, right? Maybe you need 15 minutes of that gap to prep for your next meeting, 5 minutes to run to the restroom. Then you have 10 minutes, right, to detach, right? Detach, engage in some form of relaxation, and then get your mind ready to switch back on. So those transition periods are a naturally built-in way of applying this pause, reset, and return approach. I'm not always the best at making the use of those between meeting times. I'm like, okay, I've got back-to-back meetings all day. Some of them I only have a 10-minute gap in between. And I just feel like even in that 10 minutes, I'm just scrambled, right? So
Yeah.
being intentional, even if it's just sitting in your office, closing your eyes for a minute, taking a couple deep breaths, and then jumping back into it. It's those little time points throughout the day that make a big difference.
Yeah, it actually, as you were talking about that, I worked with an executive a couple months back, and this is one of the topics we talked about was I'm so all over the place because my calendar is so stacked, the 10 to 11, the 11 to 12, the 12 to 1. And something I was working with her with, it was like, okay, like what do these transitions look like for you? And
Mhm.
oftentimes, like, and I'm sure many people can relate to this, it was you log off at 11 and you log back onto the next Teams meeting or Zoom meeting at 11 on the dot. And you do it
Mhm.
maybe 11:59 comes around, you have 30 seconds, and then you're just trying to like quickly catch up to speed and look at the agenda, like, okay, where does my mind have to be?
Yeah.
And that context switching, that task switching takes a lot out of you. So one thing we did was talking about, okay, like how do we build a system where she plugged things into her calendar, like blocks, like 5, 10 minute blocks, and it would just be like a private appointment, whatever, where she could truly reset, where she could truly have that transition. And one thing we decided was, okay, what's going to prevent her from re-engaging to use that 10 minutes to just get to the next thing? Well, she liked to clean her desk up in that time. So she would close the door to her office because she was a big fan of the open door policy. And then she would literally just begin cleaning things on her desk because she knew it was enough mental occupation to keep her mind focused before the next thing and having some of that silence and solitude there. So one example of what it can look like.
It's a great example. And a great example of how it doesn't necessarily have to be doing nothing at all, right? Like it
Mm-hmm.
can be doing something just unrelated to the demands of your job, unrelated to the task that you're about to engage with, right? So what else? What's another practical application?
As great as it sounds to plug in 10-minute breaks after every meeting, it might not be the most feasible given the demands of your schedule. So we can almost engage in these micro resets or these micro pauses, if you will. So maybe you do have 2 minutes. Engaging in some deliberate breathing during that 2 minutes can be a very effective way to hopefully calm the mind, right?
Mhm.
We've had several podcast episodes in which we talked about the gratitude practices, right? Like just even finding one thing in your day, maybe in your week more broadly, to switch, to relive that, and to put your mind in a different place, as you said, to truly detach there.
Mhm.
That way, when you go to that next thing, when you go to that next meeting, presentation, whatever it may be, you even had a 2 minute, maybe 1 minute, maybe even 30 seconds in which you had some of that solitude, in which you had some capacity to refill the tank.
Yeah, those micro breaks when you're not able to block out those 10-minute breaks, right? Like are in and of itself a good starting point. And then I would add to this another application would be limiting the inputs, right? And again, in our day and age, this has to be an intentional effort because we have stimulus coming from every direction. But removing your notifications when possible, silencing them, putting your phone face down, even so that you don't see the screen light up. Maybe when you take that micro break or that 10-minute break in between meetings, close your laptop shut. Like don't shut it down because that takes forever to restart, but just shut the screen. And that is that physical detachment from it. But yeah, limiting inputs on purpose.
To piggyback right off of that, right? And the anecdotal evidence comes back again. The If this is something that's uncomfortable for you, if this is something that you listen to this and you're like, like I like the idea of it more than I like the actual application of it, you can it's a skill, right? It's something to gain comfortability with. So if you can just create these windows, create these practice opportunities, and maybe they are 5, 10 minutes at a time. Maybe they're very, very small gaps. Maybe it isn't full-on sensory deprivation where you're sitting alone for an hour or two. That might be a lot for some people, including me. But to that end, even if you can just begin to make it a practice and okay, what do I want this pause to look like? What do I want this to reflection look like? What do I want to walk away from this pause
Mhm.
feeling, thinking, energy wise, right? Like that's taking even a couple minutes at a time to begin to incorporate this allows you to get better at it and allows you to hopefully go about your days and weeks with a little bit more refreshment and a little bit more rejuvenation.
This becomes increasingly challenging, though, when you have people who you believe are counting on you, right? Whether that be your team members who come to you for solutions or guidance on challenges they're encountering within work, whether that be your kids, whether that be your spouse. I think sometimes we start to think, well, if I fully detach, if I shut down the notifications, the world is going to crash and burn if somebody can't get a hold of me for 5 minutes, right? And that's
Yeah.
9 times out of 10 not the case. Getting comfortable with realizing that if I silence my notifications for 2 minutes, nothing's going to go wrong. So getting comfortable with that is a gradual process. But again, start small. Don't force yourself to silence those notifications and not look at, or be alone for an hour. Start
Yeah.
with a couple minutes and build up, right?
To further challenge that, because it's so easy to let ourselves off the hook and be like, okay, I'm gonna, go back to my phone, make sure I didn't miss anything.
Mhm.
Think about the people in your life. Think about whether it's work related, family related, whether it's a spouse, parent, maybe it's a child that you have. Do they deserve you at 60% of your best, where you're always on? Or do they deserve you at maybe 90, 95% of your best, right? It's probably hard to always be at 100%. But if you can be more intentional with this rejuvenation, with this silence and solitude,
Mhm.
they're getting a better version of you. They're getting a more complete, present version of you as well.
And one of the best practical strategies for implementing this, especially in the early beginning stages, is to anchor it within your day at the beginning and end. All right, so
Yeah.
start your day with 5 minutes of solitude and silence and end your day with 5 minutes of solitude and silence. And that, even if you're not able to incorporate it yet throughout your day, maybe that's daunting, maybe that's too hard at this stage, start at the beginning and end, bookend it, and say, okay, first thing when I wake up, I'm not looking at my phone for the first 5 to 10 minutes. I'm going to enjoy my cup of coffee, sit in silence, hopefully before, the rest of the house wakes up, the dogs start bothering me, or the kids start begging for food, and just sit in silence for 5 minutes. And then same thing at the end of the day. And that's a great way to start making this a regular practice.
Absolutely.
Well, I know we're getting close to time here, so I want to kind of bring us to a close. And Anthony, you kind of hit this on the head a moment ago, but what we're trying to emphasize to our listeners is that this skill of engaging in silence and solitude is to make you more present and make you better for the people that you are engaging with throughout your day, right? It's to allow you to show up at 95% rather than 60%. And it really does have such a great impact on productivity. It has such a great impact on your motivation and so many benefits to prevent burnout as well. So Anthony, on your end, what are your kind of final thoughts or pieces for our listeners to take away with them from today?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it comes to challenging some of your own core beliefs on where you stand with the true recovery and detachment practices, right? And coming to terms with this idea that they aren't separate, being are you always on or off, right? It's not an or, it's when are you on, when are you off? What does that complementary, what does that harmony look like between those two things that allows you and empowers you to be at 90 to 95% of your best over sustained periods of time?
I couldn't have said it better. It's a great summary there. And I'll just leave our listeners with this. We always like to leave you a little bit of reflection point, raise your awareness, and then start shifting into action and accountability. But ask yourselves, where in your day could you start stepping away and start engaging in some of that silence and solitude in harmony with engaging with the task of your day? Put it into practice and hopefully you'll start to see some of the benefits and find that harmony between the two. So thank you all for your time. We really enjoyed this episode and hope you all found it helpful. Please remember to like, subscribe, comment with any questions or thoughts you have. We love hearing from you all, and we look forward to the next episode. Thanks, everyone.